You're listening to The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
Satan had been working with Pharaoh to destroy all the male children. So now we knew, okay, it's not all of mankind. Now it's just this group, the ones who are children of Abraham. So let's kill them all. Well, that didn't work. But what we see is over and over and over again in the scriptures, Satan tries to kill off, based on what he knows, the source of Messiah. First it's all of mankind, then it's just a small group. Eventually it'll get down to one family line.
As Pastor Ken continues his teaching series through the book of Revelation, he'll be explaining how the dragon used his tail to throw 1/3 of the stars to heaven. This is referring to Satan causing 1/3 of the angelic hosts to rebel against God and follow after himself. God never made an evil being, but he made angels and principalities. These angels have been given the ability to exercise free will and make the choice to serve God or the devil, just as humanity has. In order to love God, you must have a choice. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Revelation chapter 12 as he continues his message, The Dragon.
He was cast down because of Adam and Eve giving him authority that he really didn't have. He stole it. And Jesus bought it back on the cross. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these things I'll give you if you fall down and worship me. First of all, that's probably one of the most bold statements in the Bible. The created creature telling the one that created him, worship me and I'll give you all this. Really? That's not going to work, is it? But notice that Jesus doesn't turn around and say, well, you don't have them. He doesn't argue that point. He does have them. They were given to him by Adam and Eve based on what they did. And Jesus said to him, go, Satan, it's written, you shall worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And the devil left him, and angels came and began to minister him. But here in chapter 12, for the very first time, we learn that the satanic angels, those that fell, it's 1/3 of the total number. 1/3. That's a pretty large volume. And that's what we see in verses 7 to 9. The stars, the angels, you track through it, and that's what it is. When Satan was cast to the earth out of his position at God's throne, they all were cast down at the same time, those that had rebelled at that point. And as we know from studying the Old Testament, especially Genesis, there was the rebellion in Genesis 3, another rebellion in Genesis 6, another rebellion in Genesis 11. So there's been groups being cast down, but they get cast down. But yet Satan still has access. And you're going like, what's up with that? Why can't you just say, no, you can't come up here and say anything anymore at all? Well, that's not the case. It says that they are, these are the principalities and the powers, of course, that God took care of. The attempt by Satan to stop Messiah at his birth, by the way, was not the first time that Satan had tried to stop Messiah being here. What had Satan been doing since Cain and Abel? Trying to prevent there being a Messiah. His first attempt, because he wasn't clear as to what the declaration of war was in Genesis 3, he thought, well, if Cain kills Abel, we're done. Then both of them are finished. Well, that wasn't it. In Genesis 6, he figured, well, if I have a bunch of watchers, a bunch of fallen divine beings, come down to Mount Hermon, and then have a group of human women and destroy the gene pool, then you can't have any humans become Messiah. Well, that didn't work because God found Noah and his boys and their wives and put them on a boat, barge actually, and then flooded the whole world and solved that problem. Okay. Well, by the time we get to Moses' birth, Satan had been working with Pharaoh to destroy all the male children. So now we knew, okay, it's not all of mankind. Now it's just this group, the ones who are children of Abraham. So let's kill them off. Well, that didn't work. But what we see is over and over and over again in the Scriptures, Satan tries to kill off, based on what he knows, the source of Messiah. First, it's all of mankind. Then it's just a small group. Eventually, it'll get down to one family line. In Exodus 1:22, Pharaoh commanded his people, saying, "Every son who's born to you, cast in the Nile, and every daughter keep alive." And that didn't work. Didn't work at all. Now remember, there are numerous attempts by Saul to kill David. Threw spears at him, tried to catch him and kill him. The reason being is that it was going to be of the line of Judah. He didn't know exactly who at that point, but eventually we find out it's the line of David. Well, okay. Satan still tried to kill the entire Jewish nation off, though. When Esther was queen, some guy named Haman managed to convince the ruler of the world at that time that, hey, we need to kill all the Jews. And Queen Esther stopped that. Esther 4:13 and 14, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not imagine that you are in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you've not attained royalty for such a time as this." We never know where the person who's going to stop it, the person who's going to be the savior at that particular point in time, comes from. And Queen Esther, who was in the palace, happened to be the one. Now, recall that Satan thought he had won when he incited the Jews and the Romans to crucify Jesus. But instead, he signed his own death warrant. He thought he had won. But we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 6 to 8, that's not the case. Paul talking, "We speak wisdom among those who are mature, a wisdom, however, not of this age, nor of the rulers of this age." He's talking about fallen principalities and powers, those fallen divine beings who are following Satan. "But we speak God's wisdom in the mystery, the hidden wisdom which God predestined before the ages to our glory, the wisdom which none of the rulers of this age has understood, for if they understood it, they wouldn't have crucified the Lord of glory." I mean, basically, they signed their own death warrant and handed the deed to planet Earth back to Jesus. And remember, he's already opened that deed up at this point in the book of Revelation. That's what all of was going on in chapter 4, 5, and 6, is that deed being opened. So what we've seen since the coming of Messiah is Satan changed his tactics, and now he thinks he has to destroy all the Jewish people. So now that's what he's all about. Anti-Semitism is satanic because Satan wants to kill every single Jew on the planet. Why does he want to do that? Well, if there is no Jew, then nobody can pray for Messiah to save them, and Messiah comes to save them in the book of Zechariah. If there aren't any Jews alive, that can't happen. Do you think he's paranoid? Sounds like it, doesn't it? Zechariah 13:9. "I will bring the third part through the fire." In other words, what Zechariah is saying is that 2/3 of the Jews alive at the end of the age will perish. 1/3 will come through the fire, be refined as silver and tested as gold. And it says, "They will call on my name, and I'll answer them. And I'll say they're my people, and they'll say the Lord is my God." Doesn't work. What we see is there'll still be some here. More about that in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. God then says, "I'll pour out on the house of David, on the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the spirit of grace and a supplication, so that they'll look on me, whom they've pierced, and they'll mourn for him as one mourns for an only son, and they'll weep bitterly over him like the bitter weeping over a firstborn." And when that was written, the major form of execution was stoning. It was not crucifixion. Crucifixion was actually invented by the Persians and refined and customized to what it became and what we're familiar with by the Romans. What the Persians did is they would just take people and impale them on spikes. So when Haman is taken and hung supposedly on his own gallows, as you study the Aramaic connected with that, that's not really the case. He was actually taken to the spike that he'd put in his yard and was impaled on it. Nice guys. Really, really fine quality people we're talking about here. Okay? Zechariah 10:6, I will strengthen the house of Judah. I will save the house of Joseph and bring them back, because I have had compassion on them, and they will be as though as I had not rejected them, for I'm the Lord their God and will answer them. So in other words, yeah, Satan's trying to kill all the Jews. He tried that during the Holocaust, managed to kill 1 in 5. Now he's going to be 2 out of 3 by the time we get to the tribulation. But how successful is he in devouring the child and the woman? He isn't. Messiah is resurrected and ascends to the Father. And there's a word used here that is an interesting word, and it refers to other things that are happening at the same time. Revelation 12, verses 5 and 6. And she gave birth to a son. I'm a little behind here. There we go. A male child who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up, harpazo, in the Latin raptura, to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God, so that there she would be nourished for 1,260 days. That's the same word that is used by Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4:17. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up, harpazo, again, together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and will always be with the Lord. The word, again, in both places is the same word. It's the word that is used for the taking of the church, the catching up of the church, and here it's also talking about the catching up of Jesus. Not only is the male child caught up, but all of his followers too. So we're seeing here in this language that all of his followers are gone too. The male child is caught up, all the followers are caught up. Well, we already saw them. They're the elders back in chapter 4. We know the church is already there. What has John not talked about since we left chapter 3? Church, right? There isn't one. What he's talking about is God dealing with Jews again, and people who are believers, but they are what we call tribulation believers that fall pretty much under the same kinds of rules that existed prior to Christ coming to planet Earth. We know that they have a different destination and a different job than we do as part of the church, but it's still interesting as you start to look at it. So the male child is caught up, the followers are caught up, and now we're at the midpoint of the tribulation. We are at the beginning of the Great Tribulation, also known as Jacob's trouble. And it's time for the woman, Israel. Remember I said it was important that we needed to understand who the woman was? It's Israel. The woman has to go into hiding. We see that referenced in verse 6. Who else is left on planet Earth at that time for the dragon to attack? It's Israel. That's all that's left. So we get to Matthew 24, 15, and 16, and Jesus tells us what the nation of Israel should know about this time period. He says, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, and Jesus adds this to make sure that those who are around at that time understand, let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. What he's saying is that if you're alive and you're watching CNN and you see this goofy guy who says he's ruler of the world and did a peace treaty 3.5 years ago with Israel, and he walks into this place and he says, I'm God, worship me, head for the hills. Head east as fast as you can, because he's after you and he's going to do everything he can to kill you. And he's going to be empowered, as we'll find later in the book of Revelation, he'll be empowered by the dragon. In fact, he'll be possessed by the dragon. Daniel chapter 12 talks about this as well. In verse 11 and 12, it's interesting, chapter 12 of Revelation, chapter 12 of Daniel. From the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. How blessed is he who is waiting and attains to 1,335 days. Okay, so now I've got 1,260 days. 1,290 days, and 1,335 days. So from the moment that you see and have to bug out, it's 42 months, 1,260 days. Very specific. What's the additional 30 days? What's the 1,290? There's a judgment that will take place at the end of the tribulation called the sheep and goats judgment. And it'll probably take about 30 days for those of us who are around at that point, which is going to be all of us if we love Jesus, because we come back with him. We're going to have to round up everybody so that Jesus can say, the ones on my right hand are good, the ones on my left, see ya. And then there's a consolidation of power. Well, you don't like the way he doesn't say it that way. That's my translation of it. Then we have the start of the kingdom, which is 1,335 days, so 44 and a half months. So back to Matthew 25, 31 to 36. This is the sheep and goats judgment. By the way, when people say that, no, the rapture doesn't occur till the end of the tribulation, well, then who's going to be in this? No, it's going to happen in the middle of the tribulation. Who's going to be in this? It's not coherent when you do that. But here's what it says in Matthew 25. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he'll sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he'll separate them one another as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. So immediately, if you've grown up in that region, you're seeing a couple of gates, and you see shepherds, and they're pushing the sheep over here, and they're pushing the goats over there. You don't want them to be together. Sheep are incredibly stupid. You want them to be over there. Goats are incredibly devious, and they try and crawl over the fence. They'll do all kinds of weird things. My daughter raised goats, and she was always complaining about them. But they did keep her grass short. And so they're over here on this side. And it says he'll put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. And there's a whole discussion as to what goes on. And we find out the goats are those who, they didn't follow Jesus. They didn't do anything to help out the Jews. They didn't do anything to help out believers. They didn't do anything. So when is this happening? Well, you got 1,260 days, 30 days to round everybody up, 1,290. See ya. Come on in. Okay? If you want to call it that. By the way, who's going to populate planet Earth during the millennium? It's all those who are on the right-hand side. They're going to be humans. It's going to be an interesting time, because walking around on the planet will be resurrected, glorified humans from the Old Testament period and the church. There'll be resurrected tribulation saints. They've got a job over in the temple. And you're going to have human beings who are in their natural bodies still having children. And they're going to live to be 1,000. So if you think it's bad having just 10 kids now, or 14 kids, I have 14 grandkids. If you think that's bad, wait until you have that many in the first 50 years of the tribulation, or after the tribulation's over with, the first 50 years of the millennium. It's going to be like it was during the period of time prior to the flood. We only read about some of these folks having babies, 2, 3, or 4 babies, but some of the rabbis think Adam and Eve had 90 kids. That's a lot of kids. And the Bible says that we'll actually wear out the houses that we build and then have to build new ones during that time period, which will be interesting. But Isaiah 16, verses 1 to 5, talks a little bit about the nation of Israel going into hiding during this time period, during the Great Tribulation. Send the tribute lamb to the ruler of the land, from Selah by way of the wilderness to the mountain of the daughter of Zion. Then, like fleeing birds or scattered nestlings, the daughters of Moab will be at the fords of Arnon. Give us advice, make a decision, cast your shadow like night at high noon, hide the outcasts. Okay, so the nation of Israel is coming into Moab. They're going east. They're going into Jordan, is what they're doing. Moab is the area that was adjacent to the Dead Sea, so it's South Jordan. Be a hiding place for them from the destroyer, for the extortioner has come to an end, destruction has ceased, oppressors have completely disappeared from the land, a throne will even be established in loving kindness, and a judge will sit on it in faithfulness in the tent of David, talking about at the end of the time period, Jesus coming and ruling. But what we see here is, where are they going to go hide? When Jesus said, head for the hills are to the east. He's pointing towards Moab. Isaiah says the same thing. And in Daniel chapter 11, Daniel talks about this same period, verse 36 to 45. The king will do as he pleases. He'll exalt and magnify himself above every god and speak monstrous things against the God of gods. And he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. Here's some information about the Antichrist, okay? He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers, okay? So he doesn't care. He has no regard for anybody that has ever been worshipped on the planet before, or for the desire of women. Don't know what that means, but it probably means he might be a homosexual, possibly. Don't know. Nor will he show regard for any other god. He doesn't worship anything. What's the god that most people worship today? Atheists. Okay, they don't believe in any god. He's an atheist. He'll magnify himself above them all. But instead he'll honor a god of fortresses, a god whom his fathers did not know. He'll honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasures. He'll take action against the strongest of fortresses. With the help of a foreign god, he'll give great honor to those who acknowledge him and will cause them to rule over the many and will parcel out the land for a price. At the end time, the king of the south will collide with him, and the king of the north will storm against him with chariots. That's called, they're gathering together for Armageddon. With horsemen and with many ships, and he'll enter the countries, overflow them, and pass through, but he'll also enter the beautiful land, and many countries will fall, but these will be rescued out of his hand. So here are the countries that he'll be unable to capture: Edom, Moab, and the foremost sons of Ammon. And if you take a look at a map of the Promised Land, and you take a look at where those tribes lived, it's everything east of the Jordan. We're talking about pretty much all of Jordan is going to be protected. Edom, Moab, and Ammon, he won't be able to take. For whatever reason, God will be protecting that area. Then he will stretch out his hand against other countries in the land of Egypt, will not escape, but he will gain control over the hidden treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt, and Libyans and Ethiopians will follow at his heels. But rumors from the east and from the north will disturb him, and he'll go forth with great wrath to destroy and annihilate many. He'll pitch at the tents of his royal pavilion between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain and come to his end, and no one will help him. So we see where he's going to be living during the Battle of Armageddon, somewhere between Jerusalem and the Mediterranean, and it won't end well for him. But just as when Israel fled Egypt, remember for 40 years, God fed them manna, took care of them? Well, for 1,260 days, he's going to do the same thing for Israel as they're hiding out in Jordan. Now, whether there are some people who so believe that Israel will be hiding in what is today known as Petra, that they've actually put barrels of Bibles there in Hebrew to make sure that they have something to read. That might be the case, I don't know, but it is going to be to the east. The Bible is very clear, and that's what it says. So we see the attention directed to the mother, Israel.
You've been listening to The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken. As you've been listening to this message, you might have some questions about what you've been hearing from the book of Revelation. That's not uncommon. Revelation is one of those books that can cause you to scratch your head and think, huh? That's why it's so good to have resources that can help you navigate the confusing things that our finite minds can't always fathom. If you'd like some additional direction, head over to theunsafebible.com and go to the About tab. There, you'll get a better understanding of what our core beliefs are, and you can even fill out a contact form. Someone can then get in touch with you and try to help answer those questions you have. If you're in the Jupiter, Florida area and would like to connect in person, you can look on our website for more details as to where to meet and when. In the meantime, you can find more messages from this series in Revelation by going to the unsafebible.com and looking under the Media tab. Pastor Ken has more fascinating things to share from this book, and be assured, it's no accident that this book is in the Bible. God wants to teach you more about His goodness, His grace, His power, and His authority throughout the prophetic book of the Bible. So be prepared to get strapped in for Prophecy 101 as Pastor Ken continues next time. Our hope is that you'll grow and even be excited for the next edition because of what you learn and are challenged by in the depth of Revelation here on the Unsafe Bible.